Now you look as cheap as you really are. Wine dripped down my $3,000 dress like blood from a fresh wound. Jessica smirked as she set the empty glass on the table, her voice cutting through the stunned silence with surgical precision. Her mother, Patricia, beamed with pride from across the room, actually clapping, slow, deliberate applause like she'd just witnessed her daughter win an Oscar. My son Michael suddenly found his phone fascinating, his thumbs scrolling through nothing, avoiding my eyes, avoiding the truth of what had just happened. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But let me back up and tell you how I ended up standing there, humiliated in front of 30 people on my 64th birthday, and how that single moment of cruelty became the catalyst for everything that followed. My name is Barbara Mitchell, and I've lived in the same house on Maple Street in suburban Columbus, Ohio, for 32 years. I raised my son there, buried my husband there, and foolishly believed that family meant something more than financial transactions and calculated performances. This is the story of how I learned the hardest lesson of my life, that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you most, and that staying silent in the name of keeping peace is just another word for accepting abuse. It started 3 weeks earlier when Michael called with what he claimed was wonderful news. "Mum, we're throwing you a surprise party," he announced, though his voice lacked any real enthusiasm. Jessica insisted. "She's been planning it for weeks." Jessica insisted. Those two words should have been my first red flag. In 8 years of marriage to my son, my daughter-in-law had never insisted on anything that benefited me. Every interaction had been carefully calculated. Sweet smiles hiding sharp edges, compliments that doubled as insults, generosity that always came with invisible strings attached. But I was still naive enough to believe she might have grown a heart, that maybe after all these years she'd finally accepted me as family. The party was at their house. My house, actually. The 3-bedroom colonial with the wraparound porch and the garden I'd planted with William before the cancer took him. I'd signed it over to Michael and Jessica 3 years ago when my husband died, when Michael told me they were drowning in mortgage payments, when he promised it was just temporary until they got back on their feet. "Just until we stabilize, Mom," he'd said, holding my hand across my kitchen table while I signed the deed transfer papers. His eyes had been red from crying. Whether about his father's death or his financial problems, I couldn't tell. You know how expensive everything is these days. Jessica's consulting business is growing, but it takes time to build up a client base. We'll refinance in a year or two, and we'll make sure you're protected. 3 years later, that temporary arrangement had become surprisingly permanent. The house was legally theirs now, complete with the granite countertops and professional-grade appliances Jessica had installed in my kitchen without asking. I was a guest in the home where I'd raised my son, where every room held 30 years of memories that apparently had a price tag of exactly $0. I arrived fashionably late, wearing the navy silk dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. $3,000 seemed excessive, but William had left me comfortable, and I wanted to look elegant. I wanted to look like someone who mattered, someone worthy of respect. Looking back now, I realize I was trying to dress my way into dignity, as if expensive silk could armor me against the casual cruelty I'd been enduring for years. The first hour went smoothly enough. Neighbors I'd known for decades complimented my dress, their fingers touching the silk with envious appreciation. Michael's colleagues from the accounting firm made polite conversation about tax season. The catering was decent, better than I'd expected, actually. I allowed myself to relax, to believe that maybe this birthday would be different, that maybe Jessica really had planned something nice for me. That's when Jessica made her move. She'd been watching me all evening with those calculating green eyes. tracking my movements through the room like a predator selecting prey. She waited for the perfect moment, during Michael's toast, when everyone's attention was focused on his rambling speech about family and gratitude, when I was looking at my son with that mixture of love and disappointment that had defined our relationship for 3 years. "Let me get you some more wine, Barbara," she said sweetly, approaching with a full glass of red wine and that smile I'd learned to distrust. I already had a half-full glass in my hand, but Jessica wasn't really offering me a drink. She was setting a stage. I should have seen it coming. The way she positioned herself, the angle of her approach, the theatrical stumble that sent the entire contents of the glass cascading down the front of my dress. But I was looking at Michael, listening to him talk about how blessed he was to have such a generous mother, and I missed the moment when performance became attack. "Oh my goodness, I'm so clumsy," she gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm so sorry, Barbara." But her eyes weren't sorry. They were triumphant. And that's when she delivered the line that changed everything, leaning close enough that her breath tickled my ear. "Now you look as cheap as you really are." She said it quietly, meant only for me. But in the sudden silence that followed the wine incident, her words carried further than she'd intended. I watched faces change around the room, from sympathy to shock to uncomfortable embarrassment. A few people had definitely heard it. Mrs. Henderson from next door pressed her hand to her mouth. Mr. Taylor from the book club looked genuinely horrified, and Patricia Roberts, Jessica's mother, actually started clapping, slowly, deliberately, as if approving of a well-executed performance. The sound echoed through the room, bizarre and wrong, and somehow perfectly appropriate for what was happening. Michael looked up from his phone just long enough to mumble, "These things happen, Mom. It's just a dress. Just a dress. Just $3,000 of silk ruined by deliberate malice. Just his mother standing in a room full of witnesses, wine soaking through to her skin, humiliated and degraded, while his wife smirked and his mother-in-law applauded, and he couldn't even be bothered to defend me. Standing there with wine dripping from my chin, feeling the stares of 30 people, I realized something crucial. This wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate act of cruelty, performed in front of witnesses to maximize my humiliation. And my son's only response was to minimize it, to pretend it didn't matter, to choose his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity for what felt like the 1,000th time. I excused myself to the bathroom, ostensibly to clean up, but really to process what had just happened. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what Jessica wanted me to look like. A foolish old woman who didn't know her place, who'd made the mistake of thinking she still mattered to her own son. But something else stared back at me from that mirror, something I hadn't seen in years. Anger. Pure, clean, crystalline anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you scream and throw things. The cold, calculating kind that makes you methodical. The kind that plans and waits and strikes with precision. When I returned to the party, Jessica was holding court near the dessert table, regaling a group with an animated story about her latest shopping trip. She glanced at me as I approached, expecting to see defeat. Instead, she saw something that made her step back, something that flickered across her face for just a moment before her mask returned. "Thank you for the party," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the room. It was very illuminating. I gathered my purse, kissed Michael on the cheek. His skin was warm, and for a moment I remembered him as a little boy, before Jessica, before all of this, and walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard whispered conversations starting up, voices asking what had really happened, whether anyone else had heard what Jessica said. Good. Let them talk. Let them question. let Jessica and Patricia try to explain away the unexplainable. Because as I drove home that night, still wearing my wine-stained dress, I was already planning my next move. Jessica thought she'd won tonight, thought she'd put me in my place once and for all. She had no idea what she'd actually done. She'd awakened something in me that had been sleeping for far too long. And now that I was awake, I was going to remind everyone exactly who Barbara Mitchell really was, starting with a little investigation into my dear daughter-in-law's background. I've been quiet long enough. Silence isn't weakness. It's the calm before justice. The doorbell rang at noon the next day. Through the peephole, I saw Michael shifting nervously from foot to foot, holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers, the kind they display near the checkout lanes, already wilting in their plastic wrap. "Hi, Mum," he said when I opened the door. "I brought you these. You know, to apologize for last night." "For what exactly?" I asked, not moving aside to let him in. He looked confused, as if I'd asked him to solve a calculus problem. "The wine thing. Jessica feels terrible about it." "Does she?" I kept my voice neutral, watching his face carefully. "That's interesting, considering what she said afterward." Michael's face went blank. What did she say afterward? So he really hadn't heard it, or he was pretending he hadn't. With Michael, it had become impossible to tell the difference. My son had developed a remarkable talent for selective hearing whenever Jessica was involved. "Come in," I said finally. "We need to talk." I made coffee while he sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework for 12 years, where we'd discussed his college plans, his career goals, his wedding plans back when he still valued my opinion. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed, filling the silence between us. "Michael," I said, setting down his mug, "how much money have you borrowed from me since your father died?" The question caught him off guard. He'd been expecting tears, maybe some guilt tripping, definitely not an accounting. "I don't know. Maybe 15, 20,000. It was all legitimate stuff, Mum. The transmission on Jessica's car, the new roof, the kitchen renovation. $47,326, I said quietly. The number hung in the air between us like a body from a gallows. Michael's face went pale, his coffee forgotten. That can't be right. I pulled out the folder I'd prepared that morning. Bank statements, copies of checks, wire transfer receipts, all laid out in chronological order with running totals highlighted in yellow. $47,326, I repeated, in 22 months. Michael stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly as he flipped through them. Some of that was gifts. Christmas. Birthdays. "I've separated gifts from loans," I said, flipping to another section. "This is just loans. Money you promised to pay back. Care to guess how much you've actually repaid?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew the number was 0. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock William had bought at an estate sale 20 years ago. Finally, Michael looked up from the papers, his eyes red-rimmed. "Are you asking for it back?" Such a simple question. Such a loaded answer. "I'm asking why your wife thought it was appropriate to humiliate me in front of 30 people when I've been subsidizing your lifestyle for almost 2 years." "She was embarrassed about the accident," he said automatically, the words coming out rehearsed. "Sometimes she says things she doesn't mean when she's flustered." I almost laughed. "Michael, she told me I looked as cheap as I really am. That wasn't embarrassment. That was malice. Jessica wouldn't say something like that." There it was. The automatic defense. The refusal to see what was right in front of him. I'd raised him to respect women, to be a good husband. I just hadn't realized he'd extend that respect to everyone except his mother. She did say it, I said calmly, and Patricia applauded her for it. Patricia wasn't even near you when the wine spilled. No, but she was close enough to hear what Jessica said, and instead of being horrified, she looked proud. Michael stood up abruptly, abandoning his coffee. I think you misunderstood what happened. Jessica is upset about the whole thing. She sent me here to apologize and to see if you wanted her to pay for dry cleaning. How generous of her. Mom, don't be like this. Like what? Like someone who expects basic respect from her family? He had no answer for that. After he left, I sat alone with my financial records spread across the table, and I made a decision. If Michael wasn't going to give me answers, I'd find them myself. I spent the rest of the day researching. Amazing what you can find online when you know where to look and have a whole afternoon to kill. I started with the basics: social media profiles, old newspaper articles, public records. By dinner time, I had a much clearer picture of the woman who'd married my son, and it wasn't the sweet, struggling young professional she'd pretended to be. First discovery: Jessica had been married before. Twice, actually. Her first marriage lasted 18 months, ending when husband number one, Christopher Bennett, a city council member from a small Tennessee town, filed for divorce, citing financial impropriety. The court documents were sealed, but the local newspaper had covered the story because of Bennett's public position. The article mentioned allegations of unauthorized credit card use and forged documents. No criminal charges were filed as part of the divorce settlement, but Christopher Bennett had declared bankruptcy 6 months later. Husband number two fared slightly better. Ryan Davis, owner of a small restaurant in Ohio, lasted 2 years before Jessica decided she needed space to grow as a person. That quote came from her own Facebook post, complete with inspirational sunset photos and hashtags about new beginnings. What she didn't post about was the restraining order Ryan had filed 3 months after their separation, or the fact that she'd maxed out 4 credit cards in his name during their marriage. By the time she met Michael, she'd perfected her act. Single, professional woman, marketing coordinator for a small firm, just looking for someone stable and kind. She'd targeted him beautifully, I had to admit. A recent widower, financially comfortable, emotionally vulnerable, with a mother who would welcome any woman who made her son happy. I'd been so grateful when Michael started dating again after losing his first wife, Emma, to cancer. So relieved when he seemed genuinely happy with Jessica. So thrilled when he announced their engagement after just 6 months. Looking back, I should have wondered why someone as charming and attractive as Jessica was still single at 32. Why she had so few close friends. Why her family rarely visited. Why she seemed so eager to become part of our tight little unit. Now I knew. She wasn't joining our family. She was replacing it with herself. The doorbell interrupted my research. Through the window, I saw a silver Honda in my driveway. Jessica's car. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. What could she possibly want? She stood on my porch, wearing a perfectly contrite expression and carrying a pink bakery box. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she'd dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, playing the role of the apologetic daughter-in-law. "Barbara, I'm so glad you're home," she said, offering the box. "I brought your favorite cookies from that bakery downtown. The chocolate chip ones." They weren't my favorites. I'd mentioned once that I liked them, probably 2 years ago, but she'd remembered, which was more attention than Michael usually paid to my preferences. "Thank you," I said, accepting the box, but not inviting her in. I wanted to apologize properly for last night, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. I was mortified by the accident, and I'm afraid I said some thoughtless things in my embarrassment. Michael told me you were upset, and I just felt terrible about it. Thoughtless things, not malicious things. Thoughtless. And she couldn't even admit what she'd actually said. What exactly do you remember saying? I asked. Her eyes flickered slightly. Honestly, I was so flustered I can barely remember. Something about the dress, maybe. I know I felt awful seeing you all stained like that. Interesting. She was going to pretend she didn't remember the exact words, which meant she knew exactly how bad they'd sounded. I remember quite clearly, I said mildly. You said I looked as cheap as I really am. Her face crumpled with what looked like genuine distress. Oh, Barbara, no. I would never say something so cruel. You must have misheard me in all the confusion. Did I mishear your mother clapping? That stopped her cold. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw calculation in her green eyes. Mum gets excited at parties, she said finally. She probably didn't even realize what was happening. I shifted the bakery box to my other hand. Well, thank you for the cookies and the apology. Actually, she said quickly, I was hoping we could chat for a few minutes, clear the air properly. I'd hate for one awkward moment to damage our relationship. Our relationship. As if we'd ever had one that wasn't built on my usefulness to her marriage. I'm pretty tired today, I said. Maybe another time. Of course. She stepped back, still smiling. I just want you to know how much Michael and I appreciate everything you do for us. You're such a generous mother-in-law. Not everyone is so blessed. There it was, the reminder of my financial contributions, dressed up as gratitude. The subtle message that my place in their lives depended on my continued generosity. After she left, I opened the bakery box. Inside were a dozen expensive-looking cookies and a handwritten note. For the sweetest mother-in-law in the world, thank you for everything. Love, Jessica. I had to give her credit for thoroughness. But as I threw the note away, I was already planning my next move. If Jessica wanted to play games about memory and misunderstandings, I was happy to oblige. Tomorrow, I was going to have a conversation with Patricia Roberts. Time to find out exactly what kind of apple had produced this particular tree. Patricia Roberts lived in a pristine subdivision where every lawn was edged to perfection and every mailbox matched the house trim. Her house was a colonial revival with white columns and black shutters, exactly the sort of place that whispered good family values, while hiding all sorts of interesting secrets behind closed doors. I'd called ahead, claiming I wanted to discuss plans for Michael and Jessica's upcoming anniversary. Patricia had been delighted to invite me over for afternoon tea. How lovely that you're taking such an interest in celebrating their marriage, she'd gushed, if only she knew. Patricia met me at the door, wearing a floral dress and pearls, looking like she'd stepped out of a 1950s magazine. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her makeup expertly applied. She had the same bone structure as Jessica, the same calculating intelligence behind the warm smile. Barbara, how wonderful to see you, she said, air-kissing my cheeks. Come in, come in. I've made cucumber sandwiches and scones. The living room was decorated in shades of cream and gold, with oil paintings of flowers and landscapes covering the walls. Everything was expensive but tasteful, the home of someone who understood quality but not necessarily authenticity. I was so sorry to hear about the little accident at your party, Patricia said, as she poured tea from a delicate china service. Jessica was quite upset about it. Was she? I accepted the cup, noting it was bone china. Expensive bone china. She seemed to handle it well at the time. Oh, you know how she is, always trying to make the best of awkward situations. She gets that from me, I'm afraid. We Roberts women believe in keeping a smile on our faces no matter what. Roberts women. Interesting phrasing. She is certainly good at maintaining composure, I agreed, even when saying things she might later regret. Patricia's hand paused slightly as she reached for a cucumber sandwich. I beg your pardon? At the party, after the wine spilled, I thought I heard her make a comment about my appearance, but perhaps I misunderstood. Oh, I'm sure you did, Patricia said smoothly. Jessica would never say anything unkind. She thinks the world of you. The lie came so easily I almost admired it. This was where Jessica had learned her craft. I'm sure you're right, I said, sipping my tea. It's just that a few other guests mentioned hearing something, and I wanted to clear up any misunderstanding. Patricia's smile became more fixed. Well, people do love to gossip, don't they? Especially when they've had a bit too much to drink. True. Though I noticed you seemed quite pleased with something during the incident. You were actually applauding. This time her hand did stop, suspended halfway to her mouth with a tiny sandwich. I was applauding Michael's speech, of course. Such a lovely tribute to you. Was that before or after the wine spilled? I I'm not sure I remember the exact sequence of events. It all happened so quickly. Liar, but a skilled one. I could see where Jessica had learned to deflect and redirect. Patricia, I said, setting down my cup with deliberate care. How well do you know your daughter's first two husbands? The colour drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her what? First two husbands? Christopher Bennett from Tennessee and Ryan Davis from Ohio. Surely she mentioned them. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I think there's been some misunderstanding. Has there? Because the public records are quite clear. Two previous marriages, both ending rather badly. Financial irregularities in both cases. I found it fascinating reading. I don't know what you think you've discovered, Patricia said, her voice shaky now. But Jessica's past relationships are none of your business. You're absolutely right, I agreed. They wouldn't be my business at all, except for the fact that she's now married to my son and has borrowed nearly $50,000 from me in the past 2 years. Patricia went completely still. 50,000? $47,326, to be precise, for various emergencies and home improvements. None of which Michael mentioned to you, I'm guessing. They said they were financially stable. They are, because I've been subsidizing them. I pulled out a folder from my purse. Would you like to see the receipts? Patricia stared at the folder like it contained a venomous snake. What do you want, Barbara? Finally. The mask was off, and we could have an honest conversation. I want to understand exactly who my daughter-in-law really is, and I want to understand what role you've played in creating her. Jessica is a loving wife who's made some mistakes in her past. She's learned from them. Has she? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like she's simply gotten better at choosing her targets. Patricia stood up abruptly, her composure cracking completely. I think you should leave. Of course. I gathered my purse and folder. Thank you for the tea. It was very enlightening. As I reached the door, Patricia called after me. Barbara, whatever you think you know about Jessica, she makes Michael happy. Isn't that what matters? I turned back to look at her, standing in her perfect living room, surrounded by her perfect things, looking suddenly old and fragile. Patricia, I said gently, I raised Michael to be happy. but I also raised him to be honest, decent, and respectful. Your daughter is systematically destroying all three of those qualities. So no, his happiness isn't all that matters anymore. I left her standing there, probably already reaching for her phone to call Jessica. Good. Let them scramble to figure out their next move. Because I was just getting started, and every lie finds its consequence. The call came at 6 o'clock the next morning. Michael's voice was tight with anger, which meant Jessica had gotten to him first with whatever stories she and Patricia had cooked up after my visit yesterday. "Mum, we need to talk. Right now." I was already awake, sitting on my back porch with coffee and my laptop, doing more research into the fascinating Bennett family history. Amazing what you could find in old newspaper archives when you had time and motivation. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart." Don't. Don't you dare act innocent. What the hell did you say to Patricia yesterday? Such language from my well-raised boy. Jessica was really bringing out the best in him. "I had tea with your mother-in-law, and we discussed family." "Why?" "You know exactly why." She called Jessica crying, saying you'd ambushed her with lies about Jessica's past relationships, made her feel attacked in her own home. Did I lie about anything, Michael? Silence on his end. Long enough that I knew Patricia had confirmed at least some of what I'd said. You had no right to dig into Jessica's private life. I had every right to understand who I've been financially supporting for 2 years. That money was given freely. It was loaned freely, with the understanding that it would be repaid. But that's not really the issue anymore, is it? I heard him take a shaky breath. What's the issue then, Mum? The issue is that your wife deliberately humiliated me at my own birthday party, then lied about it, then sent you to gaslight me about what happened. And when that didn't work, she baked me cookies and pretended to apologize while continuing to lie about what she said. She didn't lie. She was embarrassed and said something stupid in the heat of the moment. Michael, she told me I looked as cheap as I really am. Those were her exact words, spoken deliberately and with malice. Her mother heard it and applauded. There was nothing accidental or heat of the moment about it. Another silence, longer this time. Even if that's true, he said finally, going after her family was over the line. I didn't go after anyone. I had a polite conversation with Patricia about her daughter's history of marrying men and then bankrupting them. Would you like to hear about Christopher Bennett's experience? Mum, stop. He was a city council member in Chattanooga, married Jessica in 2018 after a whirlwind 6-month courtship. Sound familiar? By the time she left him 18 months later, he'd lost his house, his car, and his position on the council. She'd run up $60,000 in debt in his name. You're lying. Ryan Davis lasted longer. 2 years of marriage before she decided she needed space to grow. He declared bankruptcy 6 months after their divorce. She'd somehow gotten access to his business accounts and nearly destroyed his restaurant. Stop it. Both men filed restraining orders, Michael. Both men tried to press charges for fraud, but couldn't make them stick because she was technically their legal wife when she spent their money. I heard something crash on his end. He'd thrown something, probably his coffee mug against the wall. My calm, controlled son was having a tantrum. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you. I'm trying to save you from making the same mistakes as husbands 1 and 2. Jessica loves me. Jessica loves your bank account and mine, just like she loved Christopher's political connections and Ryan's restaurant income. You're useful to her right now, but usefulness has an expiration date. You're wrong. You're bitter and jealous and wrong. That stung, but I'd expected it. Michael, has Jessica ever contributed to your joint finances? Real contribution? Not just token amounts? She works. Her marketing consulting brings in decent money. How much? I don't know the exact amount. Ballpark. Maybe 20,000 a year. I'd found her tax returns online. Last year, she'd reported $11,000 in consulting income. This year, so far, it was less than 4,000. And how much of that has gone into your joint savings versus her personal spending? No answer. Michael, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want an honest answer. If I stopped giving you money tomorrow, could you and Jessica maintain your current lifestyle? The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. We'd manage, he said finally. Would you? Or would you lose the house I gave you, the cars I helped you buy, the credit rating I helped you maintain? That house is ours now. You signed it over. Yes, I did. Because you told me it was temporary help while you got back on your feet after Emma's death. That was 3 years ago, Michael. When exactly were you planning to get back on your feet? We've been dealing with a lot of expenses. Such as? The kitchen renovation was necessary. The old cabinets were falling apart. Those cabinets were 10 years old and in perfect condition. Jessica wanted granite countertops and stainless steel appliances to match the photos in her design magazines. You don't understand what it's like to be married to someone with standards. Standards. As if wanting nice things was the same as having principles. Michael, I said quietly, I want you to do something for me. I want you to add up everything you and Jessica have spent in the past 2 years on things that weren't absolute necessities. The kitchen renovation, the new furniture, her clothes shopping, the vacations, the restaurant meals, all of it. Why? Because I think you'll discover that you've been living beyond your means for a long time, and the only reason you haven't noticed is because I've been covering the difference. And what if that's true? If that's true, then you need to decide whether you want to be a man who builds his own life or a man who lets his wife spend his mother's money. I hung up before he could respond. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with text messages from both Michael and Jessica. Angry messages, pleading messages, accusatory messages. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. If they wanted to have a conversation about the future, they could start by acknowledging the truth about the past. But something told me they weren't ready for that kind of honesty yet. I spent the next 3 days in productive silence, making arrangements that should have been made long ago. First, I met with my financial advisor, Stephen, who'd been managing my investments since William died. I want to restructure my accounts, I told him. Set up protections so that no one can access my money without my explicit written consent. No more easy transfers. No more verbal agreements. Stephen had nodded, understanding immediately. Having some family issues? You could say that. Next, I consulted with a lawyer. Jennifer Wilson had handled William's will and estate, and I trusted her completely. I explained the situation, the money loaned, the humiliation, the pattern of behavior I'd discovered about Jessica. Do you want to demand repayment? Jennifer asked. Eventually. But first, I want to make sure I'm protected. If Jessica is capable of bankrupting 2 husbands, I need to ensure she can't touch anything else of mine. Jennifer had drawn up new documents. A revised will that clearly specified Michael's inheritance couldn't be accessed by Jessica, power of attorney protections, and formal loan agreements for the money already given with strict repayment terms and interest. If they refuse to sign these, Jennifer said, handing me the folder, you can take them to small claims court for the smaller amounts, or file a civil suit for the full amount. It won't come to that, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. Michael will do the right thing eventually. And if he doesn't, Then I'll know exactly who my son has become. On Thursday afternoon, Michael and Jessica appeared at my door together. They'd clearly coordinated, both dressed carefully, Michael in his best suit, Jessica in a conservative navy dress with minimal jewelry. They brought flowers, white roses in a tasteful bouquet. "Hi, Mom," Michael said when I opened the door. "We were hoping we could talk, all three of us." "I think there's been a lot of miscommunication lately," Jessica added, her voice warm and conciliatory. I let them in, arranged the flowers in a vase, and settled into my armchair while they took the couch. I could feel them watching me, probably rehearsing their carefully planned arguments. "Mom," Michael began, "I want to apologize for losing my temper on the phone the other day. That wasn't fair to you. And I want to apologize for any hurt feelings from the party incident," Jessica added. "I've been thinking about what you said you heard, and I realized my words must have sounded different than I intended. What I said, I heard, not what I actually heard, still maintaining plausible deniability." "I appreciate that," I said. "The thing is," Michael continued, "we've been doing a lot of talking this week about our finances, about the help you've given us, about how to move forward, and we want you to know how grateful we are. Not just for the money," Jessica jumped in, "but for your patience and understanding while we've worked to establish ourselves." I waited. There was clearly more coming. "We know 47,000 is a significant amount," Michael said carefully, "and we want to make things right. We have a proposal," Jessica said, reaching into her purse and pulling out a folder. "A formal repayment plan. We've worked out a schedule that will have everything paid back within 3 years." She handed me the folder with a proud smile. Inside was a typed document, professionally formatted, laying out monthly payment amounts and dates. It looked official and responsible and completely meaningless. $200 a month, I read aloud, for 36 months. "It's what we can realistically afford while still maintaining our current obligations," Michael explained. "Your current obligations?" I repeated. "Such as the mortgage on the house I gave you, the car payments on vehicles I helped you buy, and the lifestyle expenses that got you into debt in the first place." "We're not asking you to subsidize our lifestyle anymore," Jessica said carefully. "We're offering to pay back what we owe. At $200 a month with no interest, you're offering to take 3 years to repay money you spent in 2 years." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. "Mom," Michael said slowly, "what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that your repayment plan is insulting. I'm saying that $200 a month doesn't even cover the interest on what you owe me. And I'm saying that this entire performance feels less like genuine remorse and more like a negotiating tactic." Jessica leaned forward, her mask starting to slip. "Barbara, we're trying to do the right thing here. We could have just ignored the debt entirely, claimed it was all gifts, but we didn't. How generous of you." "What do you want from us?" Michael asked, frustration creeping into his voice. What did I want? I'd been asking myself that question for days, and I finally had an answer. "I want honesty," I said simply. "Real honesty. Not carefully crafted apologies and payment plans designed to make you look reasonable while changing nothing." "We're being honest," Jessica protested. "Are you?" "Michael, did you tell Jessica about my conversation with her mother?" His face went pale. Clearly he hadn't. "What conversation?" Jessica's voice had gone sharp. "The one where Patricia confirmed your previous marriages. The ones you never mentioned to any of us." Jessica went completely still. "That's ancient history," she said finally. "Is it? Because the pattern seems remarkably consistent. Find a man with resources, marry him quickly, drain his accounts, then move on when the money runs out. That's not what happened with us, Michael said, but he sounded less certain than before. Isn't it? You've been married 3 years, and in that time, Jessica has contributed virtually nothing to your household income while spending nearly $50,000 of my money on non-essential purchases. She works, Michael protested. Part-time consulting that brings in maybe $4,000 a year, according to her tax returns. You looked at her tax returns? Michael's voice was outraged. They're public record if you know where to look. Amazing what becomes available when someone claims business income. Jessica stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't, I agreed. But you might want to, because I haven't finished sharing what I learned about your employment history. She froze halfway to the door. Sit down, Jessica, both of you, because we're going to have that honest conversation now, whether you want to or not. They sat, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had their complete, undivided attention. The truth was about to come out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Jessica has never held a steady job for more than 18 months, I said, pulling out another folder from my carefully organized research. In the past decade, she's worked for 7 different companies in 4 different states. Michael's face was growing paler by the minute. People change jobs. That's normal in marketing. Is it normal to be fired for falsifying expense reports? Because that's what happened at Morrison and Associates in Tennessee. Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. You have no right to contact my former employers. I didn't need to contact anyone. Wrongful termination lawsuits are public record, especially when they involve allegations of fraud. I opened the folder and spread the documents across my coffee table like a dealer laying out cards. Morrison and Associates, fired for submitting fake receipts. Bradley Marketing Solutions in Ohio, terminated for unauthorized use of company credit cards. Thompson Creative in Michigan, let go during a restructuring that happened to coincide with missing petty cash. Those are all lies, Jessica said, but her voice was shaking now. Are they? Because I also found your LinkedIn profile where you list yourself as having mutually agreed to part ways with each of these companies. Funny how your version never mentions the theft allegations. Michael was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Jessica, please tell me she's making this up. Jessica turned to him with tears in her eyes, playing her final card. Michael, you know who I am. You know I would never do anything dishonest. Your mother is trying to destroy our marriage because she can't stand that you chose me over her. It was a masterful deflection, I had to admit. Turn the focus away from her crimes and onto my supposed jealousy. I chose you over her? Michael repeated slowly. Jessica, my mother has given us almost $50,000. How exactly did I choose you over her? She's controlling, Michael. Can't you see that? She uses money to manipulate us, to keep us dependent on her so she can feel important. If I wanted to control you, I said calmly, I would have made the loans contingent on conditions. I would have demanded monthly financial reports, or veto power over your purchases, or regular family dinners. Instead, I wrote checks whenever you asked and never questioned what the money was for. Because you wanted us to owe you, Jessica shot back. You wanted us to feel guilty and grateful, so we'd never be able to cut you out of our lives. Michael stood up abruptly, running his hands through his hair. Stop. Both of you, just stop. He walked to the window, staring out at my garden while Jessica and I watched him in silence. When he finally turned back, his face looked older somehow, etched with a weariness I'd never seen before. Mum, he said quietly, is everything in these folders true? Yes, all of it. The previous marriages, the job terminations, the fraud allegations. Yes. He turned to his wife. Jessica, I need you to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. Did you steal from your previous employers? Michael, please don't do this. Did you steal from them? She started crying in earnest now, the kind of desperate tears that come when all other options are exhausted. It wasn't stealing. They were expense reimbursements I was entitled to. The companies were just being petty about documentation. Falsified receipts aren't documentation problems, I said gently. They're fraud. And your previous husbands, Michael continued, his voice getting steadier. Did you max out credit cards in their names? We were married. Their money was my money. That's not how marriage works, Jessica. She looked back and forth between us, finally realizing that her charm and manipulation weren't going to save her this time. The mask came off completely, revealing the calculating predator underneath. Fine, she snapped. Yes, I took money from men who could afford it. Yes, I've made some questionable financial decisions. But so what? You benefited too, Michael. You enjoyed the nice house, the expensive dinners, the luxury lifestyle. You never asked where the money came from because you didn't want to know. The honesty was brutal and absolutely devastating. I thought it came from my mother, Michael said quietly. It did come from your mother. I just helped you spend it on things that would make us happy instead of letting her hoard it like some paranoid dragon. That was the moment I knew I'd won. Not because I'd exposed her crimes, but because she'd finally shown Michael exactly who she really was. He sat back down heavily, his head in his hands. Jesus, Jessica, what have you done to us? I've given you the best 3 years of your life. You've spent $50,000 of my mother's money and made me complicit in stealing from her. It wasn't stealing. She gave it willingly. Because you lied about what it was for. They were screaming at each other now, all pretense of civility abandoned. I sat quietly in my chair, watching 38 years of careful parenting finally pay off. Michael was angry, hurt, and confused. But underneath it all, he was still the decent man I'd raised him to be. When the shouting stopped, the silence felt deafening. Finally, Michael looked up at me. Mum, what happens now? What happens now? The question I'd been waiting for him to ask. Now, I said, you decide what kind of man you want to be. The divorce papers were filed 6 weeks later. I didn't gloat when Michael called to tell me, though I'll admit to feeling a profound sense of relief. My son was finally free, though it would take months for him to fully understand the extent of the damage Jessica had done to his life. She didn't go quietly, of course. The week after Michael asked her to leave, I found my tires slashed and my garden trampled. No proof it was her, but the timing was suspicious. Then came the threatening phone calls from blocked numbers, always at 3 a.m, always hanging up when I answered. I installed security cameras and changed my locks. At my age, I shouldn't have needed to worry about an angry ex-daughter-in-law seeking revenge, but Jessica had always been unpredictable when cornered. Michael moved back in with me temporarily. Just until I figure out what I want to do with the house, he said. But I could see he needed more than just a place to stay. He needed to remember who he used to be before Jessica got her claws into him. Living with my adult son again was strange at first. He was quiet, almost withdrawn, spending hours, going through financial records and trying to untangle the mess Jessica had made of their joint accounts. She'd cleaned out their savings the day he asked for the divorce, transferring everything to accounts he couldn't access. I feel like such an idiot, he said one evening over dinner. How did I not see what she was doing? Because you're a decent person who trusted the woman you married, I replied. Decent people have trouble recognizing predators because we don't think like they do. But the signs were all there. The spending, the lies about her work history, the way she treated you. He pushed food around his plate without eating. God, Mum. The way she treated you. I let her humiliate you at your own birthday party? Yes, you did. He looked up, startled by my bluntness. You let her treat me badly for 3 years, I continued. You prioritized her feelings over mine, her wants over my needs, her version of events over my actual experiences. And when I finally fought back, your first instinct was to defend her. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough, Michael. Sorry is what you say when you accidentally hurt someone. What you did was systematic. You systematically chose your wife over your mother for 3 years, even when she was obviously in the wrong. He set down his fork, tears in his eyes. How do I fix that? You can't fix it. You can only learn from it and do better going forward. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Henderson next door calling her cat in for the night, the same routine she'd followed for 20 years. Mum, Michael said finally, about the money, the 47,000. I want to pay it back. All of it, with interest. With what? Jessica cleaned out your accounts, remember? I'll get a second job, sell the house, whatever it takes. I studied my son's face, seeing determination there for the first time in years. Michael, I don't need the money back. Your father left me very comfortable. But I need to pay it back, for my own self-respect. That I understood. All right. But we'll work out reasonable terms. I won't have you destroying your financial future to fix your past mistakes. He nodded gratefully, and I saw a glimpse of the young man I'd raised, the one with integrity and backbone who'd somehow gotten lost along the way. The phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I immediately recognized the voice. Barbara, this is Patricia Roberts. I put the phone on speaker so Michael could hear. Hello, Patricia? I wanted to call and apologize for everything that's happened. I had no idea about Jessica's past when she married Michael. Liar. Patricia had known exactly who her daughter was, but I wasn't interested in relitigating that point. I also wanted to warn you, Patricia continued. Jessica is upset about the divorce. She's talking about fighting it, claiming Michael owes her alimony, that sort of thing. On what grounds? She says she gave up her career to be a housewife, that she's entitled to compensation for her sacrifices. Michael snorted. What career? She worked part-time at best. She's also saying she has evidence that you interfered in their marriage, Barbara. That you turned Michael against her with lies and manipulation. Did she mention which of my statements were lies? Silence on Patricia's end. Patricia, is there a point to this call? She wants to meet with you, both of you, to work out some kind of settlement. Michael and I looked at each other. He shook his head firmly. I don't think that's a good idea, I said. She's not going to give up easily. Jessica never gives up when money is involved. Then she can explain that to her lawyer, and to mine. After I hung up, Michael looked troubled. Do you think she'll really try to fight the divorce? She can try, but she won't get far. Your marriage lasted 3 years, she has no children, and she's already demonstrated financial irresponsibility. Plus, I have documentation of all the money she took from me under false pretenses. But even as I reassured him, I had a feeling this wasn't over. Jessica had shown herself to be vindictive and desperate, a dangerous combination in someone with nothing left to lose. I just didn't realize how dangerous she could become. The fire started at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because that's when my smoke detector went off, screaming like a banshee and jolting me from deep sleep. By the time I stumbled out of bed and saw the orange glow outside my bedroom window, flames were already climbing up the side of my house. Michael's room was at the far end of the hall. I pounded on his door while dialing 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the numbers. Fire department. What's your emergency? My house is on fire. 1247 Maple Street. Ma'am, are you and anyone else in the house safe? Michael appeared beside me, wearing boxers and a t-shirt, his hair sticking up in all directions. Mum, we need to get out now. We ran through the house, grabbing nothing but our phones and car keys. Outside, we stood on the sidewalk in our pajamas, watching orange flames dance across the roof of the home I'd lived in for 32 years. The fire department arrived within minutes, but by then the entire east side of the house was engulfed. They managed to save the main structure, but the damage was extensive. My bedroom, the guest room where Michael had been staying, most of the upstairs hall, gone. Any idea how it started? The fire chief asked after his crew had the blaze under control. None, I said, though I was already forming suspicions. We'll investigate, but I can tell you it started outside near the back porch. Looks like someone doused the exterior wall with accelerant. Michael and I exchanged looks. Someone had deliberately set my house on fire. The next few hours were a blur of insurance calls, police reports, and temporary housing arrangements. Michael insisted I stay at a hotel while the investigation continued, and I was too shaken to argue. By noon, we were sitting in a generic hotel room drinking bad coffee and trying to process what had happened. It was her, wasn't it? Michael said finally. We can't know that for sure. Mum, who else would do something like this? The timing is too coincidental. I had to agree. 2 weeks after Patricia's warning about Jessica not giving up easily, my house mysteriously catches fire. The police were already treating it as arson, and Jessica had motive, means, and opportunity. But proving it would be another matter entirely. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Anderson, the officer who'd taken our statement at the scene. Mrs. Mitchell, we've made an arrest in connection with your house fire. My heart stopped. Jessica? No, ma'am. A man named Derek Sullivan. He's a small-time criminal with a record for arson for hire. We caught him on a traffic camera near your neighborhood around midnight. Did he say who hired him? He's not talking yet, but we're working on it. In the meantime, I'd recommend staying somewhere safe. If someone hired him to burn down your house, they might try again. After the detective hung up, Michael and I sat in stunned silence. Derek Sullivan, I said finally. I've never heard that name before. But Jessica might have. She knows all kinds of unsavory people from her various jobs and relationships. I thought about the woman who'd married my son, who'd smiled at family dinners while planning to steal our money, who'd deliberately humiliated me at my own birthday party. Was she really capable of hiring someone to burn down my house? Looking back, I should have realized the answer was obviously yes. The hotel phone rang, startling us both. Michael answered it wearily. Mitchell residence. Mitchell hotel room. His face went white as he listened to whoever was on the other end. No, absolutely not. Don't call here again. He hung up and looked at me with something approaching panic in his eyes. That was Jessica. She knows we're staying here. How could she possibly know that? I don't know, but she does. She said she wanted to meet to talk about our mutual problem. What mutual problem? I think she's claiming we framed her for the arson. The audacity of it took my breath away. She burns down my house, then calls to suggest we're framing her for a crime she actually committed. Michael, we're leaving. Now. Where are we going? Somewhere she can't find us. As we threw our belongings into suitcases, my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I didn't answer, but it immediately started ringing again. Different number this time. On the third call, I answered. Barbara Mitchell, you interfering old bitch. Jessica's voice was slurred, like she'd been drinking. Or maybe she was just letting her mask slip completely now that she had nothing left to lose. If you're recording this conversation, Jessica, you should know the police are already investigating the fire. Good luck proving I had anything to do with it. Derek Sullivan might have something to say about that. Silence on her end. Long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. You destroyed my life, she said finally, her voice breaking. You destroyed your own life. I just documented it. I loved Michael. I gave him everything. You gave him nothing but lies and debt. He was happy with me. He was miserable with you. He just didn't realize it until I showed him the truth. She started crying then, harsh sobs that sounded more like rage than grief. I won't let you win, she whispered. I won't let you take everything from me. The line went dead. Michael was staring at me with wide eyes. Mum, we need to call the police. We will. But first, we need to disappear for a while. Because I had a terrible feeling that Jessica's next move would be far more dangerous than arson. Every lie finds its consequence, and Jessica's lies were finally catching up to her. We drove for 6 hours that night, finally stopping at a small motel outside Asheville, where Michael paid cash and registered under his middle name. I'd never been a fugitive before, but I was learning that running from a vindictive ex-daughter-in-law required skills I'd never developed. The motel room was clean but sparse, with 2 double beds and a view of the parking lot. Michael immediately started making calls to his office, to the insurance company, to Detective Anderson about Jessica's threatening phone call. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my hands and trying to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. My house was half destroyed. A man I'd never met had been arrested for trying to burn it down. My former daughter-in-law was making increasingly erratic threats, and I felt strangely calm about all of it. Mum? Michael hung up his phone and looked at me with concern. Are you okay? You seem awfully quiet. I'm fine. Just thinking. About what? About how liberating it is to finally stop pretending everything is normal. About how much energy I wasted over the years trying to keep peace with people who didn't deserve my courtesy. About how good it feels to fight back against someone who underestimated me. Michael sat down across from me. You sound almost happy about this? I considered that. Was I happy? I'm relieved, I said finally. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm not the only one who sees Jessica clearly. The police see it. The insurance investigators see it. Even you see it now. I'm not crazy or vindictive or jealous. I was right about her all along. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was short and chilling. This isn't over. Michael read it over my shoulder. That's enough. I'm calling Detective Anderson. While he made the call, I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. A few cars, nothing suspicious. But I had the uneasy feeling we were being watched. Detective Anderson wants us to come in tomorrow to make formal statements, Michael reported. He says Derek Sullivan is starting to cooperate. What did he tell them? A woman approached him at a bar last week. offered him $5,000 to torch your house. She showed him photos of the property, gave him specific instructions about where to set the fire for maximum damage. Did he identify her? Not yet, but they're putting together a photo lineup. If it's Jessica, we'll know soon. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt sad. Sad for the woman who'd been so consumed by greed and anger that she'd destroyed her own life. Sad for my son, who'd have to live with the knowledge that he'd married someone capable of attempted murder. Sad for myself, because even winning this battle couldn't undo the years of manipulation and abuse. Michael, I said quietly, I need you to understand something. Even when this is over, even when Jessica is in jail or out of our lives permanently, there are things that can't be fixed. Like what? Like the fact that for 3 years, you chose her over me every single time there was a conflict. Like the fact that you let her steal from me and humiliate me because it was easier than confronting her. Like the fact that I can't trust you the way I used to. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Mum, I know I messed up, but I thought we were working through this. We are. But working through something isn't the same as pretending it never happened. You're my son, and I love you. But you're not the same man I raised. Jessica changed you, and I need to know that the person you become going forward is someone I can respect. How do I prove that to you? By never again choosing easy over right. By standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. By recognizing manipulation when you see it and refusing to be complicit in it. And if I do those things, then maybe, eventually, we can build something better than what we had before. My phone rang again. Detective Anderson. Mrs. Mitchell, we need you and your son to come in immediately. Derek Sullivan just identified your daughter-in-law as the woman who hired him. We're issuing a warrant for her arrest. I felt a strange mix of vindication and exhaustion. It was over. Jessica had finally pushed too far, and now she would face the consequences. But as we packed our things to return to town, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica had one more card to play. And knowing her, it would be the most dangerous one yet. The courthouse steps were crawling with reporters when Jessica's trial began 6 months later. Apparently, the story of a daughter-in-law who tried to burn down her ex-mother-in-law's house had captured the public imagination. I walked through the crowd with my head held high, Michael's hand steady on my elbow. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Jessica sat at the defendant's table, wearing a conservative suit and an expression of wounded innocence that I recognized all too well. She'd lost weight since the arrest, and her lawyer had styled her hair to make her look younger, more vulnerable. But when she turned to glance at Michael and me, her eyes held pure hatred. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Derek Sullivan testified that Jessica had approached him at Murphy's Bar on March 15th, offering him $5,000 to teach an old woman a lesson. She'd shown him photos of my house, pointed out the best access routes, and specified that she wanted the fire to look accidental, but cause significant damage. She was real specific about not wanting anyone to get hurt, Sullivan said. She just wanted to scare them, make them understand they couldn't mess with her family. Jessica's lawyer tried to paint Sullivan as an unreliable witness, a career criminal who'd say anything to reduce his own sentence. But the prosecution had other evidence. Bank records showing Jessica had withdrawn $5,000 in cash the day before she approached Sullivan. Security camera footage from the bar showing them together. Cell phone records proving she'd been in my neighborhood the night of the fire. The most damning evidence came from Jessica herself. They played the recording of her threatening phone call to the hotel, her voice thick with rage as she promised that she wouldn't let me win. When Jessica took the stand in her own defense, she was masterful. Tears flowing freely, voice breaking with emotion, she painted herself as a victim of my manipulation and Michael's abandonment. Barbara Mitchell destroyed my marriage, she testified. She couldn't stand that Michael loved me more than her, so she dug into my past, twisted my mistakes into something sinister, and turned my husband against me. I was desperate, heartbroken, not thinking clearly. Her lawyer guided her through a narrative where every action was justified, every crime was a misunderstanding, every lie was self-defense against my alleged persecution. "I never told Mr. Sullivan to burn down anyone's house," she insisted. "I may have vented my frustrations to a stranger in a bar, talked about wishing Barbara would understand how much she'd hurt me, but I never asked anyone to commit arson." It was a compelling performance. If I hadn't lived through her manipulation personally, I might have believed it myself. But the jury had heard all the evidence, seen all the documentation of her pattern of behavior. When they returned after 2 days of deliberation, their verdict was swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Arson in the first degree, conspiracy to commit arson, making terroristic threats, and criminal harassment. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison with possibility of parole in 8. As the bailiff led Jessica away in handcuffs, she turned back to look at Michael and me one final time. The mask was completely gone now, replaced by raw fury and something that might have been genuine surprise. She'd really believed she could manipulate her way out of this, could charm the jury into seeing her as the victim. She'd finally met a situation where her looks and lies couldn't save her. Outside the courthouse, reporters thrust microphones in my face, shouting questions about how it felt to see my daughter-in-law convicted, whether I felt safe now, what message this sent to other families dealing with financial abuse. "I feel relieved," I said simply. Justice was served. But that wasn't the whole truth. Justice had been served, but the real victory wasn't Jessica's conviction. It was the fact that my son was standing beside me, finally understanding what I'd been trying to protect him from all along. 6 months after the trial, Michael and I stood in the rebuilt section of my house, admiring the new bedroom and updated electrical work that insurance had paid for. The space was brighter than before, more modern, though it would take time before it felt truly like home again. "I never thanked you properly," Michael said as we surveyed the work. "For what?" "For saving me from her. For refusing to give up even when I fought you every step of the way." I looked at my son, seeing someone I barely recognized but was beginning to respect again. The past year had aged him, but it had also strengthened him. He'd paid back every penny of the money Jessica had taken, selling the house they'd shared and moving into a modest apartment. He'd started therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated. Most importantly, he'd learned to trust his own judgment again instead of deferring to whoever spoke loudest. "You saved yourself," I told him. "I just gave you the information you needed to make better choices." Still, I'm sorry it took me so long to listen. Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what we actually value. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Roberts. Over the past year, she'd reached out periodically, offering apologies and explanations that I largely ignored. This message was different. "Jessica asked me to tell you she's sorry for everything. She knows she was wrong." I showed the text to Michael, who shook his head. "Even now, she's trying to manipulate people through her mother." "Probably. But you know what? It doesn't matter anymore." And it didn't. Jessica was in prison. Michael had learned his lesson. And I was living my life on my own terms for the first time in years. I'd discovered that standing up for yourself, even when it was difficult and painful, was infinitely better than accepting mistreatment for the sake of keeping peace. My house was rebuilt, my relationship with my son was stronger than before, and I'd learned something valuable about my own strength. Sometimes the wine stain ruins the dress, but it also reveals who people really are underneath their masks. And sometimes that revelation, painful as it might be, is exactly what everyone needed to see. 3 months later, I threw another birthday party. This time I wore a simple black dress that cost $50 and invited only people who genuinely cared about me. Michael gave a toast about second chances and hard-won wisdom. Nobody spilled wine on me, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building a better life than the people who tried to tear you down ever imagined possible. I've been quiet long enough. But silence isn't weakness. It's the calm before justice. And justice, when it finally comes, is worth every moment of the wait. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters, and you matter. Remember that the next time someone tries to make you feel cheap, because dignity isn't something they can take from you, it's something you choose to keep, no matter what they do. Every lie finds its consequence, and every person who stands up for themselves teaches others that they can do the same.